Real Madrid had a terrible time of it. They're often talked about as the dictator's club. I wouldn't be able to say precisely when the current rivalry began to germinate, but I would say that people need to understand, if they're looking at the derby, that during the Civil War, initially, Real Madrid had a terrible time of it. They're often talked about as the dictator's club. Francisco Franco, who was the military dictator, who, when his side smashed, with Nazi help, smashed the Republicans into the ground in the Civil War, some of Real Madrid's players and directors stood against what was happening and were often imprisoned or killed. And when they began to come out of that and reform themselves, Real Madrid as a club, the two dominant clubs by a long way were Atletico and Athletic, which you talked about, which is the club from Bilbao.
Mhm.
And so again, it's slightly hard to imagine, but Real Madrid were not the dominant force. And if there was a third force or somebody vying to be second or first, in those days it was Barcelona. And it wasn't until the man after whom the stadium is named, Santiago Bernabéu, had a vision for how Real Madrid could establish a different identity and try to haul back Atletico as traditionally the leading side in that city, that maybe the heat of the rivalry emerged.
You've said on this show before, you've talked about how Real Madrid are sort of misunderstood as Franco's favorite team in a genuine sense. He sort of used them politically when it was expedient. It seems like Atletico in that period had some ties to the government after the war was over. They merged with it was a club tied to the Air Force essentially, and they became Atletico Aviación. Um, but maybe it's too simple to say that they were, tied up in the regime in a way that maybe people would want to narrativize it.
Well, look, I think you've said it adequately in that, again, by a long way, Dr. Sid Lowe is the authority on the Civil War and its effects on Spanish society. But I think that if you've paid attention as somebody who's been living here rather than a Spaniard who was alive during those times, one of the things that's clear is that Francisco Franco didn't have a particular afición for football. He was from Galicia. He liked to holiday in San Sebastian, where the local team is Real Sociedad, and therefore Franco not having a particular love for football. You used the phrase that the dictator would use a club or a moment or a footballer to his advantage. It was when things were politically expedient, then you might get grace and favor. You might feel the warmth of his smile upon you. And if not, not. So, for example, again, this is a Madrid derby weekend, so this needs to be a small deviation. But when the two clubs were brutally fighting over Alfredo Di Stefano, the dictator, who, without any question, could have said to the Catalan club, you can GTF. I'm the big boss. He's playing for Madrid. Franco's government came up with a solution where the clubs were to share Di Stefano, and Di Stefano was to start his time in Spain at Barcelona. Indeed, he did play for Barcelona. And therefore, don't get the impression that I'm portraying Franco in any way as a fair man. I'm just relating the historical facts back to your phrase, which is about expediency. And he took decisions based upon what was useful to him at the time. and also just because he was powerful. Doesn't necessarily mean that he was consistent or intelligent or equitable. He was a small bully with very strange ideas. And I would have said that it was only once somebody who'd fought on Franco's side, Santiago Bernabéu, began to make Madrid something that Spain, parts of Spain could be proud of, and began to make Real Madrid, because Franco not only imposed a policy that everything and everyone foreign was like a germ. If you don't go abroad, don't let foreigners in. And I come back to the reason I'm mentioning this is that when the European Cup was introduced in 1995, in 1955, 56, which has become the Champions League, it's exactly the same competition, just with a different structure. Franco saw that Real Madrid was a club which could smash foreigners and could win and could subliminally say to his population, we are superior. And look how the foreign menace is, these foreign bad people are being pushed around by Los Blancos, our team. Expediency, as you use the phrase, comes in again. And in my opinion, it's from there that there's a preferential status accorded to Madrid, because they begin to spend well and build well, and they're in the old stadium in Chamartín, but the galactical concept that they bring in wasn't feeding some sort of Francoist, some of his ministers maybe, but Madrid has to win at all costs. He saw them as a vehicle via which he could emphasize the idea of Spanish superiority to the foreign hordes around the rest of the continent.